Good evening. This workshop meeting of the Board of Trustees of Socorro ISD is being called to order May 5th, 2020, and the time is 5:30. This meeting will be held by teleconference. The teleconference audio can be accessed at the following toll-free number, 1-866-899-4679, using the access code 949-691-317. Any member of the public wishing to comment on an agenda item can send the comments to the following email address, board-questions@sisd.net. On March 16th, Governor Greg Abbott granted a request by Attorney General Ken Paxton to temporarily suspend a limited number of open meetings to the extent necessary to allow telephonic or video conference meetings in response to the coronavirus. In accordance with those suspended rules, we certify the following. Notice of this meeting has been posted online for at least 72 hours. Number one, although members of the board are not gathered in a central physical location, we do have a quorum in attendance at this meeting by telephone call and internet access. Number two, we are meeting by use of both telephone conference call, online access, and through use of an email link for questions. Number three, if a member of the public submitted written comments in advance, the board president or a member of the administration will read the comments into record before or during the board's consideration of that item. If you would like to provide comments at a future meeting conducted by video conference or telephone call, please follow instructions on the meeting notice. Number four, all other meeting procedures will adhere to board adopted procedures to the extent practicable. Number five, an audio recording of this meeting is being made and will be available to the public at a later date. Number six, we apologize in advance for any unforeseeable difficulties and ask for your patience as we navigate unprecedented conditions. Number seven, if you have any questions about these suspended laws, please call the Office of the Attorney General at 888-672-6787. And now I'll do a roll call to make sure we have a quorum. Ms. Rodriguez?
Here.
Mr. Guetta?
Present.
Mr. Gandita? Is Mr. Gandita with us?
It seems he came off the call, sir, ma'am.
Mr. Garcia?
Present.
Mr. Mena?
Present.
And Mr. Morales?
Here.
Okay, so we do have a quorum and we are called to order. If you will all please stand and join us for the Pledge of Allegiance, which is being led tonight by Ms. Cindy Ratana.
Good evening, everyone. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you, Ms. Ratana.
Thank you.
And item number 3, board workshop A, presentation of fiscal year 2020-2021 revenue estimates and preliminary budget. Mr. Reza?
Yes, thank you, President Nájera, Dr. Espinosa, members of the board. I am Tony Dessa, Chief Financial Officer. You turn to page 4. We are here this evening to continue our series of workshops to review the proposed budgets for the upcoming 2021 fiscal year. And if you can turn now to the next slide, which is on page 5 of your budget workshop. So the agenda, here's the agenda for tonight's presentation. We have provided you with a detailed budget for the General Operating Fund, the Child Nutrition Program, the Debt Service Fund, the Print Shop, the Workers' Compensation Fund, the Healthcare Fund, and finally the Title I budget. We will also be discussing the proposed compensation proposal for the 2021 fiscal year, but please note that this is simply for your information at this time. We will request that you take formal action on compensation at our regular scheduled board meeting on May the 19th. And finally, we'll be discussing the budget workshop agenda that's slated for June 7th. That's the 2nd. So if you can turn to the next slide, please. Revenue estimates. So here are the current revenue estimates for the general fund. Please remember that these are estimates that will change as we get more updated information on the various funding variables. And as you can see, there is an increase in our local revenues, primarily due to the projected increase in our property values of at least 4.01%. I've also made some downward adjustments on several local accounts, namely delinquent taxes, rent revenues, and interest earnings. So with respect to state revenues, I've adjusted the projected average daily attendance for the next year to 1%. Just bear in mind that this year we're ending our ADA with a 1.31% increase. And so I've adjusted accordingly, a little bit of a downward trend to next year to 1%. I've also increased our special populations average daily attendance for various programs such as SPED, State Compensatory Education, and CTE due to our current ending amounts. I've seen that they're actually higher than I had the last time that I submitted this information to you on March the 31st. And as a result of, there's an additional state revenue estimates of what was presented in March. So I have received certain calls from some board members concerning House Bill 3 and the use of state funding increases for compensation. So as I mentioned in the March 31st budget workshop, House Bill 3 states that in the year when the basic allotment increases, then 30% of the revenue generated must be used for compensation increases. Just want to remind the board that the basic allotment was increased this year by 1,020 from $5,140 to $6,160. That's for 2020. There is no increase in the basic allotment for next year. Therefore, the amount remains the same. Consequently, there is no requirement that we use 30% of the increase in state funding for compensation. That's just for your information.
Ms. Nájera, this is Gary Gandara.
Yes,
Miss-
Mr. Canada.
And I apologize for cutting Mr. Ress off, but Mr. Ress, I got a quick question on that. I've been told otherwise that 30% has to be used for compensation. And I just want to
My
know what-
understanding, so my understanding, Mr. Gandara, is that it's in the year that the basic allotment increases that it's required. Now, what you'll see as we go through the presentation and we get to compensation, I think we're meeting that. Even, you know, because you'll see what our comparable proposal is and you see the amount that we're incurring. That's more than 30% of this $10 million that we're looking at in increased generated revenue.
Is it 10 million that we're receiving or 25 million that we're receiving?
So the $25 million was in the current year for 2020, not for
Okay.
2021. So we reviewed, and based on that, we feel that we met our requirement for the 30% because we gave a 5% raise as well as 5.5% raise for teachers with 6 years of employment or more, as well as giving 5% for the other employees. But when it goes to 2021, sir, for the following year, that's not a requirement in my understanding of.
So let me, and I don't mean to cut you off on, but the real question is, okay, I know it's not a requirement, but is the money there for the compensation?
For next year,
Yes,
for 2021,
yes.
to the extent that the 2% that we're proposing, I think it needs 30% requirement.
So right now
Because
you're
we're
not
looking at
sure
next
then.
year.
So right now you're not sure.
I'm certain that what we're proposing meets the House Bill 3 with respect to that 30% requirement.
Okay, well, I mean, I understand you and I understand perfectly, and I'm not trying to put you on the spot, which I'm probably doing by what I'm doing. And I apologize on that, but I really need to know the fact before we get to that point. Either we're meeting it or you think you're meeting it. There's a big difference. You know, I really need to know that because we're dealing right now with the situation, with this whole virus thing going on. We're not sure what's going to happen in the future. I need to know that when we give our compensations that we're right at the right number, because I'm hearing numbers that from 2% to 4%, is what we could be getting, is what we should be getting. And I want to know that we're on the right number. I need to know that the 30% is of that 25 million is what we're supposed to be giving in compensation. That brings that up to, I think, 4%.
So again, the 25 million is not for next year. It's for the current year, the year that's about to end in June. And given the fact that we gave a 5% raise and a 5.5% raise, we met the requirement for the 30% for this year, which is when the rule took effect.
Okay.
That rule is not required for next year. So when you look at the 2% that we're proposing, I think that we're going to meet. I'm pretty sure that we're going to meet not only the 30% rule, but also keep in mind is that I don't believe that we are required to meet the 30% rule for next year. I don't know where the 4% is coming from, because it's not a number that we proposed or stated to anybody.
Well, I know, and I'm talking, and I'll be honest. I've talked to our associations, and we all come up with numbers, and right now is I want to be sure where we're at, because like I said, I know this year we gave 5%, but we're not losing any money next year, if I'm correct, right?
No.
For the 2021.
No, sir.
So the money's there to give a raise, a decent size raise. I understand you're proposing a 2, and we've had these discussions before about, what you're saying is a 2, and like I said, Mr. Ressa, I'll never knock you. You've done a wonderful job for this district, and we greatly appreciate that. I greatly appreciate it. You've done a wonderful job, you and your team. But on the same aspect, I'm also looking to make sure that we keep and retain our great teachers and all our employees that we have, because we're fighting for to keep them, because it's money talks. Let's be honest. If another district is paying them more, they're going to leave. But we also want to make sure that that they don't, if we can compensate them correctly, and be that district that is like I said, you've kept us in the right. You kept us in the black, and I appreciate that. And like I said, I'm only one person here, but, again, I'm trying to make sure that we have the right number to provide compensation to all our employees.
Yes, sir. And I certainly respect where you're coming from, sir.
President Paul Garcia.
Yes, sir, Mr. Garcia.
Okay, Mr. Ressa, by any chance, we wouldn't have the actual verbiage of that HB 3 that states the 30%, right? Because I know it says as as determined by the district, or I think isn't it determined by the board? How does that?
Mr. Garcia, this is Susan Olson. I actually have the verbiage. Do you want me to read it?
Yeah, if you could.
Okay, so this is from
clarification.
the Texas Education Code, section 48.051. So basically, in a summarized fashion, it states, during any school year for which the maximum amount of the basic allotment provided is greater than the maximum amount provided for the preceding school year, a school district must use at least 30% of the amount to provide compensation increases to full-time district employees other than administrators. 75% of the 30% must be used to increase the compensation paid to classroom teachers, librarians, school counselors, and school nurses, prioritizing differentiated compensation for classroom teachers with more than 5 years of experience, and 25% may be used as determined by the district to increase compensation paid to full-time district employees. And again, this is the Texas Education Code, section 48.051.
So, Mr. Garcia, the information that we've received, that's the code. the direction that we've received from TASBO and other organizations is the basic allotment being the key. But we can certainly double check and be ready to provide that information on the 19th.
Thank you.
So what I can do is I can keep going through the presentation, and then we can revisit this when we get to the proposal, if that's fine with everybody.
Yes, sir.
Thank you. So if we go to the next slide, then what we have here is the current budget drivers that we have. So currently in our budget, we have a commensurate general pay increase of 2% for teachers, nurses, librarians, counselors, and other job classes. Additional instructional positions due to projected growth at the campuses and the expansion of dual language program. Additional instructional positions for the special education program. Funding to implement full-day pre-kindergarten in most of our elementary schools. An increase in the funding for the faculty stipend recommendation. Funding to provide laptops for the incoming freshman class. Funding to purchase 10 buses, and funding for staff development for state mandated reading academies. So we get to the next slide. There are some adjustments that we made to the budget given the downward trends that we have in the economy. This year, the district received a grant to purchase 10 clean air buses. With the board's approval, we purchased 10 additional buses over the grant amount so we can get ahead of the curve. Consequently, we have reduced the budget by $1 million, which represents 10 buses. Now we can reevaluate the need in February of 2021. And by then we'll know where we stand with respect to what the legislature is projecting for the 2022-23 biennium. We've also eliminated classroom replacement furniture amount that was allocated on a yearly basis, which is $500,000. So note that currently in our budget, we do not have the cost for the TASB pay study that's going to be presented by Mr. Capoya after this budget presentation. So we go to the next slide. What you have there is the current status. So currently in our budget, general fund budget, we have revenue estimates of $443 million and a budget of $447 million, leaving us currently with a projected deficit of $3.4 million. Now note that the board has a detailed budget of the general fund by function and class objects that's listed on your budget booklet, pages 25 through 36. So President Nájera, I can certainly answer any questions that the board has on those pages now, or I can continue with the presentation and then answer them later, whichever you prefer.
Does anyone have any specific line item questions? Ms. Race, if you want to go ahead with the presentation, and we can check again to see if there are questions at the end.
Yes, ma'am. So on the next slide, the child nutrition budget for your review. These are the projected revenues for the child nutrition program. As you can see, there's decreases in local revenues due to decrease in our interest earnings and a la carte cash sales for the upcoming school year. There's increase in federal revenues, a projected additional meals served for the upcoming year. Note that we can always amend these budget amounts upward or downward as we go through the beginning of the new fiscal year. With respect to expenditures, the decreases in the payroll expenditures represent the fact that we haven't budgeted a lump sum payment or bonus for fiscal year 21 as compared to last year. And just keep in mind that a detailed budget of the child nutrition program is listed in page 37 of your board packets. So I'll go to the next slide, which is the debt service fund. There is a current increase in current tax collections, primarily to the increase in our assessed values, as well as a current decrease in prior year taxes, penalties on tax collections and interest earnings. And there's also a decrease in their overall debt service due to our refunding opportunities that we've taken advantage of in the past. So these are the three budgets that this board's going to adopt through a vote on the June regular board meeting. The other budgets that we're going to talk about will be reviewed, and then the board will approve them on the June board meeting during in the consent agenda. So we go to the next slide. This is the print shop. for 2021. The budget is very similar to last year's budget. The increases pertain to salaries and fringes. Overall, there's an $8,000 increase in the budget. We go to the next slide. That is the workers' compensation fund. We've budgeted an increase of $524,000 from the current year due to an increase in claims this year. And we've also factored an additional increase for 2021. And so while the claims budget amount has increased, we're still projecting a slight decrease in fees due to a renewal agreement with the third-party administrator. And then the next slide, you have the healthcare fund. So this slide and the next two slides present the budget breakdown of the healthcare fund. We are budgeting $65.7 million for our healthcare fund. This is an increase of $7.1 million from the current year. And as you can see on this slide, we budgeted an increase in claims and prescription fees, which are labeled Express Scripts, as we are projecting an increase in both categories. Now, just a point of clarification, in 2019, both the claims and the prescriptions were handled by Cigna, our third-party administrator. Therefore, those two items were lumped together under claims. We have since awarded the benefit pharmacy program to Express Scripts, and therefore they are now separated. Also, the administrative fee was increased to reflect actual increases in 2020. So we go to the next slide. This slide presents information on the clinic and the pharmacy that's located within the clinic. Note that the clinic is now fully operational, so you will see increases in general supplies as well as the pharmaceuticals for the pharmacy. Also, startup costs and equipment is no longer budgeted for the clinic. And then finally, the next slide is the last slide on the healthcare fund. It reflects the remaining budget items for the pharmacy as well as the budgets for the custodial staff that's located in the location. Just for your information, this is an ongoing budget, and certainly as we get more information, we'll amend the budget as necessary. And then the next slide represents the Title I fund budget. Please note that this budget reflects the planning amount, and it will increase after the budget has been adopted. So unused 2020 funds will be rolled over and added to the planning amount as well as the maximum entitlement. So historically, we've adopted this budget in June so that campuses have access to their staff development funds in July before the start of the school. Now, we don't know if that's going to happen next year, but certainly that's what we've done from a historical standpoint. So let's go to the next page. So for the board's consideration, the administration is presenting compensation proposal for 2021. Again, the board will be asked to take action on this proposal at the next board meeting on May the 19th. And so what the administration is recommending, a 2% increase off the calculated midpoint, inclusive of the step for employees paid on the teacher or counselor pay scale. So these employees are teachers, nurses, librarians. So this is a $1,138 increase for all employees paid off the teacher pay scale. And those amounts range from $1,138 to $1,375 based on the days of their contract. So just note that our ROTC instructors have a 226-day contract. So with that, this 2% proposal, starting pay would be $52,262 for bachelors, $54,762 for masters, and $56,260 for doctorates. So we go to the next slide. For counselors, this pay reflects an increase of $1,138, not $1,132. I apologize for that typo. And starting pay would be $55,510. Counselors with extended contracts may have ranges increasing from $1,199 to $1,290. So finally, let's go to the last slide. This is the administration is recommending a 2.0% midpoint increase of the respective pay scale for paraprofessionals, auxiliary, technology, clinic, and administrative employees. Now, the administration is making this recommendation given the fact that their economy is in a recession. And this will have a negative impact on our state revenues for the 2022-2023 biennium. Now, as a reminder to the board, the last time the economy was in a recession was in 2008 and 2009. And indications are that this is worse than then. At that time, the federal government provided federal stimulus funding to the state, which amounted to about $13 billion. So in 2010 and 11, The state received $13 billion in state funding on what were called ARRA funds. And Socorro ISD received $11.7 million for those 2 years, what were called state fiscal stabilization funds. And they were used at that time. The following biennium, for 12 and 13, the state didn't have the stimulus funds. They were projecting a $25 to $27 million shortfall in revenue. So what we received was a shortfall in funding. So we lost $15.6 million in state funding in 2012 and $21.2 million in 2013. Now, we had certain things that certainly assisted us. In 2012, we had the federal jobs bill. We received $7 million in funding, and we had to move over librarians and nurses to the federal funds for that 1 year to help us. And I remember talking to librarians and assuring them that they would be going back to the general fund in 2013 because they were concerned about being moved over to soft money. And those are one of the things that we did. We also did budget cuts. We did other things to be able to assist us. In 2013, we did raise the tax rate. We raised the tax rate 3 pennies for the maintenance and operations tax rate and generated about $9 million in additional revenue. 2/3 of it was from state funding. So let us not forget that 85% of our budget is salaries and benefits. So when cuts have to be made, the non-payroll budgets may not be sufficient or have sufficient capacity. This 2% proposal is very similar to what the board approved back in 2011. At that time, the board approved a 1.5% increase compensation, even though at that time we knew that something was coming down our way. So we know that the state is hurting. Oil is down to the mid-20s per barrel. This biennium, the budget's based on the price of barrel being around $50 a barrel. Right now, the price of barrel is so low that companies can't make any money. 57% of the state's revenue comes from sales tax. This month, the comptroller announced that there was a decrease in the sales tax revenue, the lowest since February of 2010. And this is just in March, when really half of that month, we saw the actual effect of the pandemic. We're not talking about April, May, moving forward. So there's going to be an impact. I'm sure of it. We all know that. It's going to be bad. It's just how bad is it going to be? So the question is 2% a viable, reasonable compensation? We're proposing that it is. It's very comparable to what happened back when we got cut this amount. And we don't know if we're going to get cut more. So with respect to compensation proposal, that's what we're proposing at this time. Now, if we go to the next page, the next slide, this slide provides the board with the budget impact on compensation at 2%. The budget impact is $5.6 million for a general pay increase of $1,130 for teachers and a starting pay of $52,262. So when you look at our revenue increases on the general fund budget on page 6, which is about $10.6 million. One could argue that we certainly are meeting more than 30% of our revenue being used for compensation. So having said that, we'll go to just the next slide. And this pretty much lists the agenda for the June 2nd budget workshop, which contains revenue updates as well as incorporate the compensation approved by the board in May. So whatever the board approves in May, the 19th, we will incorporate that into the budget that we'll look at on June the 2nd and kind of make sure that we present the budgets the board will be adopting through board action in June. We'll also provide the board with a copy of the proposed tax rates for the 2021 school year and the projected tax impact on SISD residents. So that's the presentation. Are there any questions on the actual budget and numbers itself?
President Nakara, Paul Garcia.
Yes, sir, Mr. Garcia.
Mr. Reza, I know you're not privy to this concern I had, but I know Mr. Campoya is. I received a call from an employee, and he was talking about stipends. And I guess the way the administrative regulations are written, only 2 of 3 get a stipend. If there's three employees at that school, only that qualify for that stipend, only 2 of them get it. Only 2 of them are allowed to receive that stipend. I don't know if that, I mean, it should have some kind of impact on this. Maybe Rudy, you might want to chime in.
Yes, sir, Mr. Garcia and board members and President Nájera, Rudy Campoya, Chief Human Resources Officer. Had the conversation with Cabinet today. We are going to have Cabinet tomorrow discuss that concern with Armando Martinez, the Director of Fine Arts, and get more clarification as to which high schools are requiring a third assistant director of band. And that way we can determine what the recommendation would be for next school year.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
Are there any other budget questions?
President Nájera, this is Mr. Guerra.
Yes, sir, Mr. Guerra.
Mr. Ressa, in regards to the 2%, are we looking at a one-time lump sum maybe like we did last year?
Not at this time, Mr. Guerra.
So
And the reason for that, Mr. Guerra, is the fact that we need to be cognizant of the fact that we might need to use reserves to get us through 22 and 23. And because who knows how much we're going to get cut. And if we don't have a lump sum payment, then that could be something that could be used for 22 to 23 to keep people employed if it's a really significant cut that we're looking at.
So, Mr. Ressa, just so I can understand something, and correct me if I'm wrong, it was a biannual year, so we knew exactly how much we were getting for the past 2 years, correct? We knew last year.
Well, I mean, it's all. I mean, there's a variance, Mr.
No, but
Guerra. There's a
it
different.
was based on the allotment, correct? And the reason I'm saying is that when we decided, we started off last year with a 2%. We started off low last year. We knew we were going to get money from the state. And when we raised it to 5%, we still got additional money afterwards, didn't we?
Yes, sir, we did. But those additional monies.
So Mr. Ressa, hang on. So my question is, that money that we got additional, how much extra do we get additional per student? Was it like $1,000, I believe? Because the first year was at 51. I think 5,100.
It might have been about $531 per student in enrollment basis. But
So that money we received, that was after we gave the 5% raise and $1,000 bonus, correct?
Yes, sir.
So we know coming into this year, we know how much money we have. So I guess my question is, and I guess, and I understand your concern for next year. I understand that. But this year, I see we have the money. I think 2% is to me, I think it's kind of low because we have the money coming up. I believe we could get a little bit more and a stipend as well. Well, not stipend, but end of the year. Because where we start off every budget with 2%, 2%, 2%. Last year we had some money coming in. Started off at 2%, went up to 5%. So I think we can come back and do better than a little bit of 2%. Those are just my 2 cents. Thank you, sir.
Yes, sir. I just want to mention that while we did receive extra money, a lot of that extra money was based on certain programs that had certain expenditure requirements, and we were required to certainly add personnel for those particular programs. For example, state compensatory education, where they were using the census blocks to determine funding. Well, we added class size reduction teachers because the expenditure requirement went up from 52% to 55%. So we added, what, 49 teachers, about $3 million to the budget, and that's required. Also, we're adding full-day pre-kindergarten teachers because that's part of House Bill 3. So the additional money that we're getting is dedicated towards that program. So we certainly are adding that those number of teachers to the budget. So yes, sir, we always start at 2%, but the additional money that we got, most of that was tied in for specific programs. And it's important to keep in mind is that you've never had a pandemic like this. That's a game changer. We've always had a certain set where we start at 2% and we move forward, given certain assumptions. This assumption is totally different. This is something that we haven't seen before. And And the question is how much of an impact we're going to hit. So are we going to go ahead and give a raise that we're going to have to work? Will we be able to sustain for 22, 23? I think that's the question. But I certainly respect and understand where you're coming from, sir.
Well, one of the good things is that we're still a growing district. So obviously by growing, we are growing, we're gonna get more teachers. But as far as us growing by enrollment, which is a good thing, that helps our basic allotment or ADA also as well, doesn't it? And our tax base.
Yes. Yes, sir, it's true. We are, now, House Bill 3 is requiring us to lower the tax rate because they want to lower the taxes for the property owner. And so they'll be shifting, as we lower the tax rate based on our property values, the state's promising to make up the difference in increasing the state revenue to make up for that loss in property taxes. The question is, are they going to be able to do that in 2022 and 23? It's a lot of pressure that's being put on that budget. But you're right, sir. I mean, the fact that we're growing bodes well for this district. I'm not denying that. You're absolutely right on that. The question having to do with next year is, what is going to be the start of the year? There's a lot of things. Are we going to start like we traditionally do? It's a 50-50. We may not be doing starting the school year like we always have. Are parents going to want their students to come back to school right off the bat in August? That's why one of the reasons why I decreased the average daily attendance to 1%, even though this year we ended up with about a 1.3% increase in our average daily attendance. There's going to be a drop off. I don't know how TA is going to determine the attendance for next year, especially at the beginning of that first semester. I think that's the million-dollar question of what we're going to do with respect to how do we start school and where parents are going to be comfortable sending all their kids to school. That is something we have to keep in mind as we move forward.
Mrs. Nájera? Mrs. Gándara?
Yes, sir, Mr. Gondeta.
Mr. Reza, and we all understand this. We understand that there is a big unknown coming. You know, we don't know what's going to happen. We don't know when we're going to start school, if we're even going to start school. Are we, you know, a lot of this, you know, if we do open schools, you know, a lot of parents are going to send their kids because, you know, they got to go to work and they have no choice. So it's going to be in the school, you know, it's going to be on the schools to make sure that we keep them safe. You know, another thing, and I hate to be a devil's advocate on this, but I'm going to ask something. I said, I see a lot of positions that are open right now. We have over, I'm not sure, Rudy, if you can tell me how many positions we have open right now that we're trying to fill for different, you know, for different jobs that we have right now. That most of these jobs have been open almost for a year. And right now, if we're looking to the future that we might have to cut or we might have to do something, why are we adding to our payroll right now? You know, if we're, you know, we've done it this past year. I mean, you know, I think it was a you, Mr. Guerra, one of your kids had pretty much a substitute all year. You know, and if we have all these positions that we need to fill, and most likely we'll end up having to cut 2022 or 2023, why not stick it out now and not hire for those positions to help us save some money? I know it's not something that we want to do, but, you know, it's just my thought on it. I mean, why add more to the payroll? I don't know how many people we have right now of, you know, positions that we need to fill. How many do we need to fill, Rudy?
We have approximately 80 positions total. We have some that are posted already for next school year. So for some of those positions that we couldn't fill, it's the requirement of having a dual certification. So we did struggle. We're not the only district that has struggled with it. So we're continuing to recruit. And right now we're already posting for next school year so that we can start recruiting for next school year.
How much, what does that turn into dollars? How much money is that?
I would not know. We have the 80 that I mentioned is a mixture of some admin, some auxiliaries, some certified teaching positions, and some
Oh,
paraprofessionals.
so we're looking at around about $52,000 per person. Let's go the round and some probably even a lot higher, but let's go with that number. So what are we looking at?
So I think if you're looking at $52,000 at about, I don't know, 80 positions, it's about maybe $4 million and so forth. And just fully, if we're looking at $52,000, actually, Mr. Gandara, we use $60,000 for, as a baseline for teachers. So, I mean, we're looking, so there's going to be some savings there. But yeah, but I do think it's important that we move forward with hiring teachers, and I know that you agree to that, right?
Oh, no, of course. I don't want, I mean, I want our teachers to be, you know, have their small classes. I want them to, you know, not to have to worry about all this that's going on. But right now, you know, I'm hearing you, what you're saying. And if we're looking that we might not have, you know, we're gonna have to cut in 2022, you know, or 2023, I mean, then we gotta start saving somewhere. If that's what, you know, if that's what you're going by, and if there's positions that we really don't need right now, then why, I mean, I'm not saying our teacher, but I guess there's some positions that we really don't, we can live without. To start saving some money.
Yes, sir. Yes, sir.
You know, that's just my thought. I'm saying, I don't know if I'll be here after next year, or I might be. And that's always to the board at the end of the day. And so, like I said, I'm still trying to make those best decisions before that day shows up. Like I said, I want the best for all our employees, but also if there's a way right now to save some money, well, then let's figure it out. Let's not wait till then and say, oh, you know, we should have done this back then. Well, you know what? If there's some positions that we can live without right now, then let's live without them. But again, that's the way I'm thinking. You know, we got other board members here, but we need to start thinking then for the future. There's some things we can do right now that can help alleviate that pain.
Yes, sir. We'll certainly, and we'll bring that, and certainly Dr. Espinosa's listening, so we'll surely discuss that with cabinet. Certainly, Mr.
Yes,
Gandara.
President,
Go ahead.
President Nájera?
Yes, sir, Dr. Espinosa.
Yeah, going with what Mr. Trustee Gandara mentioned, and Trustee Gandara, we kind of already started that, because I agree wholeheartedly with everything you said. We gotta, you know, plan for the future, because the last thing we want to do is, like you mentioned, is lay people off, and we don't want to hire positions. But just to kind of give you one example, Chief Castorena, I guess a couple of months ago, 6-7 months ago, whatever it was, the trustees approved for us to hire additional police officers. I think it was 24 or 25. I think it was 25. And about a month ago, I spoke to Chief Castorena. I asked him, hey, how many have you hired? And I believe he told me 15. And I said, you know, put the brakes on it right now. Put the brakes on it right now, because like you mentioned, Trustee Gandara, we got to start, you know, tighten up our belts, and if there's positions, I'm not saying that we don't need the police officers at our schools, but like Mr. Ressa mentioned, this is a game changer, this pandemic. But so we're kind of already having those conversations. There's going to be some other areas that we're also looking at where we pump the brakes as far as adding more positions to our school district. But thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Espinosa. Are there other budget questions? Okay, then we will move on with item 3B, which is the TASB pay study overview. And I believe we have a question. Ms. Macias, do you have that question?
Yes, President Nájera. I did have a question emailed in, and it reads, greetings. I have some members who have expressed concerns about stipends. Some employees have not had an increase in their stipend amounts commensurate with their duties for over 20 years. Others are not receiving a stipend because even though they do all the work, there are only a certain number of stipends for that campus. I am hoping that ad regs will be changed to correct the limit on stipends per campus and that stipend amounts will be reviewed before adopting next year's budget. I have also been contacted by bus drivers who usually pick up work during the month of June. Do you know if there are any changes to the unemployment laws which would enable them to file for unemployment because of COVID-19? Respectfully, Angelica Soto, Socorro Education Association.
Thank you, Ms. Macias. And Mr. Campoya, if you want to continue with the TASB pay study overview, and then we can, if the stipends are addressed, we can go from there.
Yes, ma'am. President Nájera, Dr. Espinosa, members of the board, Rudy Campoya, Chief Human Resources Officer. On page 90 of your board book is where my presentation starts. So I'll be referring to the page number just so that I won't lose you. I'll try to go as slow as I can. Stop me if you have questions. We, this school year, hired the Texas Association of School Boards, which is TASB, referred to as TASB, to do both a stipend review and also a pay study. The stipend review was already submitted to us. That is something that Cabinet has reviewed, and that is something that Mr. Reza already included in the budget. So we are going with TASB's recommendation, which answers the question that Ms. Soto had, because we are making some drastic changes to the stipends and also to the regulation. Now, there may be employees that may not get a stipend, but we reviewed everything carefully. And if that is the case, those employees can be addressed if they have questions. On page 91, that's where the presentation starts, and it shows the market districts that were used for the pay study. Just to give the board members an idea of what a pay study is, every company, every school district is recommended that they do pay studies every 3 to 5 years to stay competitive in the relevant labor market. That way, when we post jobs, for example, we post jobs with the salary, the minimum, the midpoint, and the maximum, so that it could be an eye-opener and we help us recruit employees to our school district. When we hired TASB, we've hired TASB several times. 5 years ago is the last time, approximately 5-6 years ago is the last time that they did a pay study for us. So it is time for us to do a pay study, and that's what we had them do this year in the fall, and they submitted their presentation to us in April. So what I'll be presenting to you is what TASB is recommending. Cabinet reviewed TASB's recommendation, and we are recommending to stick to their recommendation as it benefits a lot of our employees, a lot of our positions. Now, when a pay study is done, we look at the position, not the person that is filling the job or the position. 2 parts that are done on a pay study is job classification or reclassification. And the second part is, if that job is reclassified, do we go in and give a salary comparability increase, or in some cases, a placement scale increase to employees, which is very, very costly. So a lot of school districts that I speak to and a lot of other companies that I know of, they usually just go with the recommendation for classification as opposed to doing both the classification and the increase that comes with the classification. So when we do the classification, the only increase the employees would get is whatever the board approves, which would be the 2% if that's the case, off the new midpoint. Now, if employees fall below the new minimum, then they are placed at the minimum. So I hope I'm not confusing you all, but I'll go ahead and start. On page 91, you see all the districts that they're used to compare us and used as a market. So all the districts that are there, we have some Region 19 districts and districts around the state. Now, on page 92, I'm going to go through all the pay scales with the exception of teachers. Now, TASB also did the teachers and the counselors, which Mr. Reza kind of went over it on his presentation, and we were right in line with TASB's recommendations. So the 2% being proposed for teachers and counselors, is around what TASB recommended. So on my presentation, you're not going to see the teachers or counselors, but you'll see the rest of them. On this slide that I'm showing you right now, page 92, that is our pay scale for administrative positions. On the bottom, you'll see the scales from 101 all the way to 109. It's also including teachers, just so you can see where teachers were to fall compared to the administrative pay scale. Now, what you see a whole bunch of diamonds and grouped together that looks kind of dark in some areas. The diamonds represent employees. So if you see one diamond, we have 1 or 2 employees in that area of the pay scale. So for example, if you're looking at pay scale 103, you see that at the very top, we have 2 diamonds, which means we have some employees there. Same thing with pay grade 104 and 105. On every pay study, what they try to do is they try to move up the scales, which is the minimum, the midpoint, and the maximum, up to try to have every employee within the minimum and the maximum, trying not to have employees outside of the maximum. In some cases, it's very difficult to do because we've had employees that have been here for 30 plus years, and every time or every year the board approves the salary increase, they get bumped up and then they end up above the maximum. So this one is a current pay scale for admin. The next page, which is page 93, shows you the proposed. So if you notice on the proposed, it kind of gathered everybody below the maximum, with the exception of 102. There's one purchasing agent who is above, and then on 106, the occupational therapists were bumped to that pay scale, but we have a couple, if not 3, that are above the max, and those are going to remain there because of the year's experience they had. Now on page 94, that's where we start with the actual positions that are on the administrative pay scale. 101 is the lowest pay grade for that pay family administrative. On 102, you will notice that you have several 101s towards the bottom of that section 102, which is the supervisor, equipment technician, CNS, the other 3 supervisors. What that means is TASB is recommending that those positions be at a level 102. They are currently at 101 and they're being recommended to 102. Now, before I continue, to the right side of each pay grade, you have the daily rate minimum, midpoint, and maximum. That is the proposed minimum, midpoint, and maximum. Now, to give you an idea, which I don't have in the presentation, I just have what is being proposed, but our current 101 minimum is daily rate of 194.67. So it is being upgraded to 198.45, and the same thing goes with everything else below or above 101, the 102, and so forth. And the same thing with the midpoint and the maximum. Everything was moved up for every pay grade. And again, according to TASB's recommendation, that is what the market is showing. Now on pay grade 103, you notice anything that is numbered, anything but 103 has been moved to 103. Now, understand that nobody is being moved down. Everybody that is being moved up, either 1 pay scale or 2. For example, if you notice on 103, the accountant and the bid agent and the coordinators, some of the coordinators, they were at 102. They are being bumped to 103, which is reclassified. There is one 101 position who is being bumped to 103 as well, and that is the coordinator of sports program. Page 95, you have the 104s, and right there on 104, there is a coordinator of college and career readiness who is in the counselor pay scale and is being recommended to be moved to the administrative pay scale 104. And you have a few of 103s that are being bumped to 104, And then you have a specialist Title I who is on the teacher pay scale, but there are 2 or 3 other employees that have the same title that are different than this particular employee. So this particular employee is being moved with the rest of them to 104. Now on 105, you also have a coordinator of guidance and counseling who is being moved to the 105 from the counselor pay scale. And then you also have some 104s. So basically what you're going to see from this point forward is some of those that are being bumped up to that current pay grade. The 106, we have the assistant principals there, and we also have the assistant directors. So the assistant principal for high school is being moved from the 105 to the 106. And then the assistant directors, they're all being moved to 106. There was one that was already 106, but the rest of them are being grouped to 106. Then on 107, you have most of the directors. You have the chief of police, you have our internal auditor, you have our principals for options and keys, and then you also have our principals for elementary and for middle school. So all those are being grouped as 107, and so they did not move. All those have been 107. 108, we have our principals of high school, the same thing with the 108s. And the 109s, you have all of cabinet. Now, the only thing that happened with these groups that did not move is, of course, the minimums were moved up, the midpoints and the maximums were also moved up. Now we go to technology pay scale. And this is our current technology pay scale. And as you can see, everybody's within the minimum and the maximum. The recommendation by TASB is to move the scales up so that we can be competitive, which still maintains everybody between the minimum and the maximum. And this is their pay scale. 201, we currently don't have any employees on the 201. On the right side, you'll notice that we have the hourly rate. On the previous pay family administrative, it had the daily rate. So they vary depending on the pay family and how the market is driven either by hourly rate or daily rate. So on 202, you have the technician, which remains as 202, 203 the same thing, and then 204 stays the same. For 205, you'll see that all the system administrators and the software engineers were reclassified to 205. Then the very top one, there is an administrator that works in finance closely with technology who is being recommended to be on a 205 as well. Then on 206, we have one manager that went to 206. And then on the 207, we have one manager that went to the 207. Now we move to the medical clinic. On the medical clinic, very few changes. You know, we don't have a lot of staff in the clinic, but we have to maintain a separate pay scale for them. This is the proposed, so it kind of keeps everybody within the minimum and the maximum. And this is their pay scale. So 501 is CMA. CMA is a certified medical assistant. We have the pharmacy technician. We have the LVN, which is a licensed vocational nurse, which currently we don't have anybody. As we grow, and if we find that there is a need, then we have that option available to hire an LVN, but right now we don't have an LVN. On 504, we have the clinic manager. We don't have a registered nurse because our clinic manager is a registered nurse, so we're saving there. So we have the RN clinic manager. On 505, we have a nurse practitioner, but we did not hire a nurse practitioner. Instead, we hired a physician assistant. Our current physician recommended to hire an assistant instead of the nurse practitioner. And then, of course, we have our pharmacist and we have our physician. What we notice on this one is, since this is a new scale, the amounts that were set for the clinic were right in line with the market. So very little increase because it's a brand new scale and we had already used the market to determine that pay scale. Now we go to our paraprofessional structure. You'll notice on this one, everybody's all over the place, especially in 301. We have a whole bunch that are above the maximum, and also on 305 and 306. So this one, they moved everybody up, but you'll notice that on 301, it was very difficult to move it too high. So we still have some of the campus clerks. And in looking at those, those are campus clerks that have been here for 30 plus years. And that is the reason why they're up there. We also have a warehouse clerk who has been here for quite some time, a data entry specialist, and PEMS attendance specialist. Then on the 306, we have some admin specialists, one, who have been here for a while, and then, they've been getting increases, so that's why they're above the maximum. Now on 305, you'll notice at the very top, you have a principal secretary for an elementary school. If I'm not mistaken, I believe she's retiring this year, so that will no longer be there, because she's been here for quite some time. This is the actual pay scale. It goes from starting in 301. And again, just to give you an idea of the bump from the minimum, our current 301 starting pay hourly rate is $10. So it went to $10.80. And then our current midpoint is $12.76 for the 301, and it went to $13.50. So every pay scale, again, got a bump in pay to be competitive with other school districts that are similar in our size. 302, you'll notice that the clerk warehouse, the community services liaison, no, just the clerk warehouse, I'm sorry, went to 302. Then on 303, there was no movement. Everybody remained at 303. On 304, the same thing. The study showed that, they are classified correctly according to the market. 305, the same thing there. Most of them, if not all, were classified correctly. 306, you have a few that are being bumped to 306. You'll have the clerk for accounts payable, the purchasing clerk, that are 305 currently, and they're being bumped to 306. 307, you have a few that are specialists that are being bumped up from 306 to 307. And 308, there is no change. They're all staying as 308. And then 309 is a new level. So the 309 is for the executive admin assistants or specialists. They are being bumped to 309. Now, TASB is also recommending for the 301 to 304 that we come up with a placement scale, which helps us tremendously. That way, we're more equitable with our employees. If they come in, for example, a campus clerk with 10 years of experience, we would place them at starting pay $12.11, according to the placement scale. So each, if you notice 301, 302, 303, and 304, that's what TASB is recommending. My team in HR is making sure that, this is in line with some of the other placement scales. What we've looked at already is it seems to be in line, so we'll probably be going with this placement scale. And this only affects new employees coming into a school district with years of experience, or anybody that gets promoted as well. Page 108 of your board book is the instructional support. Now, this is a brand new pay family per se. However, we're still using the 300s code. This is anybody that is at a campus that is providing instructional support, which means they're working closely with the campus to provide students any type of teaching or assistance. Since it is new, they're recommending this. You'll notice that nobody's above the maximum. And this is a new pay family scale for them. So you'll notice all the instructional aids basically are being placed on this scale. 301, we wouldn't have anybody there. It's reserved for future use. 302 would be the PE aides. 303, you have the instructional at-risk aid, the library aid, the nurse's aid. 304, you have the rest of the instructional aids. And then on 305, you have those specialty instructional aids and the special ed aid. Then on 306, they did move the special ed aid job coach to 306 from 305. And then on 308, you have the instructional aid mariachi. The LVN, that's not the clinic LVN, that is the campus LVNs. And currently, that I'm aware of, we do not have any. We used to have one at Escontrias Early Childhood, where that person was practicing at the pre-K center under the other nurse that was at the Escontrias Elementary. But right now, we don't have any LVN, but we have it there in case there is a need in the future. For instructional support, they are recommending a full-blown placement scale from 301 to 308. Similar to the paraprofessional, the only difference is this one does go all the way to 308. Next one is the auxiliary pay scale. So same thing, same concept. You'll notice in 405, there are some that are over the max. If I can just get your attention real quick on 402, you'll notice there's a lot of black. That means we have the majority of those employees between the minimum and the midpoint. That's what that means. So on the proposed, they're recommending that it be a little bit increased, a little bit, and that way we only have a few head custodians and security guards at above the max, and we have the aquatics facility technician. Now you'll notice on the right side, it says BD on the bottom. They're recommending that we remove the bus drivers from being on a certain level and them being separate, which gives them a bump in pay, because that is a position that we struggle in filling. So this is the proposed auxiliary. You'll notice at 401, we have the cafeteria monitor and the crossing guards. 402, we have the craft helper who is being moved to 402. On 403, we have the cashier 1, and we have the painter and the grounds 1 who are being moved to 403. Excuse me. 404, we have a few. We have the mechanic for the custom equipment. We have the printer 2, and we have the small engine repairman who are being moved to 404. Page 115, we have the 405. And on 405, you'll notice there are a few that were bumped to 405, like the painter 2, the repair technician, CNS, and the roofer 2. 406, we have the carpenter 3, who is being moved up to 406. And we have the vehicle mechanic, who are the basically mechanics in transportation. 407, we have the head mechanic, who is being moved to 407. And then on our 408, we have the plumber 3. We have some of the technicians for the electronics fire alarm and the HVAC who are being moved to 408. 409 is, I believe, a brand new one, and they're bumping. Let me just verify that it is a brand new one. No, 409 is not a brand new one. 409 is already there. The 410 is a brand new one. So you'll notice for the 409, the foreman for the maintenance manager is being moved to 409. Then for 410, the foreman for the auto shop is being moved to 410. Then the bus driver is separate, which is the last one. They are currently in the 405, and they are being bumped to a different category, which is just bus driver. Now, to give you an example of how much the minimum increase for bus drivers. Currently, we have the minimum at $14.09. So their minimum went to $15.50. So they got almost $1.41 increase per hour. And that is going to help us tremendously in recruiting our bus drivers. They're also recommending a placement scale for the auxiliary 401 and 402, and also for bus drivers, but we already have a placement scale for bus drivers, so we're just going to update it with the new hourly rates. Our last pay scale is police services. TASB is recommending that we create a separate one for, I don't know if it's the last one, but police services will be on a separate pay scale. So right now they're using the current pay structure that we have, and this is the proposed. So keeping everybody between the minimum and the maximum. And this is their pay scale. It's the 600 pay scale. So they're going, police dispatcher is going from the 406 auxiliary to the 601. And just to give you an example or idea, 406 for minimum was $15.57 per hour. So the 601 starts at $16 per hour. Then the 602, police canine handler and police officer, they are being moved from 407 to 602. To give you an idea for their increase on the minimum, they were at $17.29, the 407s, and now they're at $19.42. So it's a big bump. Then for the police sergeant, going from 409 to 603, the 409 pay scale minimum was at $23.42. So now they're being recommending the pay scale to start at $24.97. Then the 604 is a police lieutenant. The police lieutenant was on the professional pay scale 101, and they're being recommended to be on the 604. The 101 current pay scale minimum is daily rate $194.67, and this one, the daily rate is $233.71. Now the 601 to 603, those are hourly rates. And then the 604 is the daily rate that you see there. The placement scale, they're also recommending a placement scale for police officers. We already have one for police officers. So we're going to use TASB's recommendation and implement a placement scale for the remaining. That was the last one. On page 121, you'll notice the cost. Now, this is a cost, and I don't want to confuse you with what Mr. Reza presented, because what he presented does not include the proposed pay scales, which increased the midpoint. So once we increase the midpoint, if it's 2% off the midpoint, that amount is more than what Mr. Reza presented. Understand Mr. Reza presented a higher number because he's including the teachers and the counselors. What I have here is not including the teachers or the counselors. Now, when I say teachers, it includes the librarians, the nurses, all those. So you'll notice on the last column, that is our current cost, which is already something that Mr. Reza presented on his PowerPoint, which included that amount with the teachers. The proposed cost increase, if the board approves the budget with this new pay scale, would be $2.9 million, which is approximately $910,000 more than what Mr. Reza presented. That's how much it would cost us going with TASB's recommendation. But I want to reiterate, it does not give employees a salary increase apart from the 2%. It only allows them to get more from the 2% because the midpoints increased. And also those that fall below the new minimums are bumped to the new minimum. Now, this allows us mainly to remain competitive if we did a calculation rough estimate if we had decided as a team SISD to go with giving employees a salary increase based on the number of years, and it's a very rough estimate. You're looking at between $7 million to $10 million to give everybody a salary increase. That's not including the 2%. That's just to give everybody what we call a salary comparability, and so does TASB, placing everybody within the min and max, which is something that very rarely occurs in districts because of the budget impact that it has. So a lot of districts, what they do is they try to just keep everybody between the minimum and the max, however, increasing the minimum, midpoint, and maximum. And that concludes my presentation. On May 19th, I am going to present the 2%, and I'll be giving you all a little more detail as far as costs by pay family, and I will be giving you a comparison as well with our teachers, just so that you can see where we stand with our teachers compared to other school districts. I'll probably include the bus drivers, which is something that has been a hot topic in recruiting. And if the board desires to look at any other particular positions, I can include those as well. I can't include everybody because if not, it'll be a very lengthy presentation, but I can always provide the board any information that the board desires. At this time, I can answer any questions.
President Nájera, this is Ms. Rodriguez.
Yes, Ms. Rodriguez.
Mr. Campoya, can you tell me again, and I know, again, just for the sake of clarity, Mr. Reza presented for the proposed salary increases, there was a total proposed amount to the budget of $5,649 más o menos. So you're
So Ms. Rodriguez, if the board approves this presentation, then this $5.6 million would go to $6.5 million as a budget impact. Because you'd be adding yes, ma'am, you'd be adding the $910,000 to the $5,649,000 that's listed on page 21. And so the budget impact would be $6,560,000 and about $244.
Okay. And that would include what you presented, and if the board approves the reclassifications of this TASB study, the total impact just for this part of the budget would be an additional 6.5 million. Is that correct?
Yes, ma'am, because we're adding the $910,000 to the $5.6 million that's listed on slide 21 or page 21 of your budget book.
That's the page I'm looking at, sir. Thank you so much. Just wanted clarification on that. Thank you.
You're welcome, ma'am.
Are there any other questions for Mr. Campoya? Mr. Campoya, this was a great presentation. If the board approves the study, it certainly will help out a lot of our employees. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
We will move on to item 3C, which is House Bill 3, Goal Setting, Early Childhood, and CCMR. Ms. Borrego.
Good evening, Board President Nájera, Dr. Espinosa, members of the board. I wish you a good evening. I hope everybody's doing great. Thank you for the opportunity to present to you today. Today, what we're going to do is we're going to talk to you. Many things came with House Bill 3. And one of the things that we were tasked with were the board goals and the superintendent's evaluation. So today I am honored to be with three of my amazing team members. Jessica Macias, Kelly McBain, and Dr. Adam Starkey. They will be putting on a presentation today. HB3 board goals are based on a couple of things. Number one, early childhood data based on reading and on math, looking at K through 3, the accountability in that, and also CCMR. So today, as we get started, Ms. Macias is going to go through the presentation. Ms. McBain will then assist as well, and then so will Mr. Starkey. We'll go through the presentation, and then when we finish, if you have any questions, we'll be happy to entertain any of those questions.
Good evening, President Nájera, Dr. Espinosa, and other members of the board. I am Jessica Macias, the School Improvement Officer for the Socorro Independent School District. My colleagues and I come before you tonight to review the proposed early childhood literacy, math, and CCMR board goals as required by House Bill 3. You can find a copy of this presentation in your board book on page 123. So again, House Bill 3 requires school boards to adopt detailed plans developed by their management teams that achieve goals: early childhood literacy and mathematics, and college and career and military readiness. This is in keeping with the alignment with the state's goal of 60 by 30, which means 60% meets proficiency by the year 2030. Again, looking at all of our students who take our state assessment in the 3rd grade, that 60% of them would be at the MEET standard. And 60% of our high school seniors would be graduating without the need of remediation, and by achieving either an industry accepted certification aligned with a living wage job, enrolled in post-secondary readiness education, or enrolling in the military. And now I turn this over to Dr. Starkey, who will review the updates on our board goals and how it's aligned to the superintendent's evaluation.
Hey, thank you, Mrs. Macias. Good evening, President Nájera, members of the board, and Dr. Espinosa. The 3rd slide in our PowerPoint discusses the guidance that we have received from TEA on the HB3 board goals and the superintendent's evaluation. There had been many questions about that as to how the superintendents across the state in each district would be evaluated. Like, was it going to have to be done a certain way, or was it going to be heavily focused on this? Was local control going to be removed? And all sorts of things came up. And we, as of April 16th, after I want to say that we were pretty persistent in asking about it, they finally developed some guidance to share with us, where it talks about the goals being best practice to be a part of the superintendent's evaluation while not required, and that very specifically local school boards retain control on what is included within the superintendent's evaluation, as long as the requirements, which I am certain you all are very used to, are met within Texas Administrative Code Chapter 150. So with that, you could probably see the best way to look at it would be that the superintendent would be evaluated as the common instrument that is used, or what have you, and then this would be something supplemental at best explanation, ladies and gentlemen.
Thank you, Dr. Starkey. So as you can see, the HB3 has now required districts to put more emphasis on early childhood literacy and math. And in developing the goals the proposed goals that we are coming to you with, we looked first at our data trends. in looking at how our third graders are currently doing at the meets level on our state assessments. And again, we are on trend to meet this 60% meets proficiency goal by the year 2030. You can see that for the past couple of years that we are already surpassing the state as well as the Region 19 in reading proficiency. And in math, we are on trend to meet that 60% by year 2030 goal a little bit faster than we are in the reading. So in looking at the data trends, that's how we were able to come up with the proposed goals that we are presenting before you tonight. The first board goal that we would like to present in early childhood literacy is the percent of third grade students that score the meets grade level or above on the STAR reading assessment will increase from 49% to 51% by June 2024. The state of Texas did give us this particular Excel document in which we would calculate baseline data based on our last year's performance, which you see there before you. You see the non-applicable for 2020 because the state did cancel all state assessments for this year. And then we start looking at our assessments and growth going back to 2021, hopefully that we are back on track at our campuses. They did give us specific student groups to develop goals for as well. And you can see that at the bottom that out of the 13 student groups that they proposed, we only have data for these particular 6, which is our African American population, our Hispanic, our white, our special education population, our economically disadvantaged, and our EL population. So you can see we have the baseline data there. We have, we're not applicable for this current year. And then those year after, you see the proposed trends in growth as we hope to meet the state's 60% meets proficiency by the year 2030 goal. In order to achieve this goal, we do have to have some progress measures in order to make sure that in kinder, first, and second, they are assisting and monitoring the growth in literacy. So we are going to have some progress measures using the assessments that we currently use for reading. We use iStation, which is a reading diagnostic that does give us a good data on how our students are progressing in reading proficiency. And it also gives us good data on our student groups as well. So for the next couple of years, we will be using this particular instrument to progress monitor our students. And as you can see in kinder, we already have 56% of our students, which are at tier 1, which is means that they are at grade level. And we would like to increase that to 58% by the year 2024. Again, monitoring the same students group as our board goal for literacy. In first grade, we would do the same thing. We would use this iStation instrument to monitor our board goal. And again, you can see that first grade is already at 64% at grade level, and we would like to increase that to 66% by June 2024. Though the increases do seem small, again, they are, we are on track. We want to make sure that we are on track to hit that goal in the third grade. So we need to monitor and again, make sure that our students are getting the proper instruction and intervention at the early grades to make sure that our kids are on track by third grade. In second grade, you can already see our progress monitoring goal as well. We already have 73% of our students are at proficiency. They are at grade level, and we would like to increase that by 75% by June 2024. We do understand that there is a dip between second grade and third grade, again, with the reality of the state assessments and student taking it on their own. But we do see that with this particular instrument, we are able to track our students who are at the tier 1 level and able to read on their own. And it, again, gives us that data to provide those interventions early on. For math, we are already doing pretty well in math proficiency. You can see that 55% of our students currently taking the STAR assessment in third grade are already passing at the meets level. And again, so we are on trend to hit that 60 by the year 2030 earlier than expected. However, with changes coming to the STAR math assessment, we didn't want to be too presumptuous. So again, we kept each one of these goals very conservative. If you can see our baseline data for 2019, 2020, again, not applicable because the assessments were canceled this year. And then looking at 21 and to 2024, looking at our growth as well. Again, still monitoring the same student groups, the same 6 student groups based on our demographics for our elementary campuses. This would be our board goal for math. As far as progress monitoring for math and making sure that we are going to hit that goal, we currently use the TEA rapid naming assessments for math. And we have found that these assessments that we currently use are not at the rigor that we need to progress monitor. So they are giving us higher percentages than what we currently see in our third grade math, especially for kinder, first, and second. Some of the reasons is because this is a one-on-one assessment. It's not based on students' individual capabilities like it is on iStation. So we are going to move forward with a different progress monitoring tool for next year, and that is iStation Math. We found that iStation Math does give us the rigor. It does have the capabilities for students to take this assessment individually so we can get a true picture of where they're at, especially with their math needs. So once we return back to campus, hopefully in the fall, we will progress monitor. We will give them a diagnostic to see where they are at for the beginning of the school year, and then we'll have the proper data for you within the student groups as well. And now I pass it over to my colleague, Ms. McBain, so that she can go over and review the CCMR board goal.
Hi, good evening, President Nájera, Dr. Espinosa, and members of the board. This is Kelly McBain, Director for Research and Evaluation. The next section begins on page 137, which is the proposed CCMR, or College Career and Military Readiness Board goal. It is important to note that Socorro ISD has already met the state's 60 by 30 plan of 60% of students graduating high school without the need for remediation and achieving one of the following 3 things: achieving an industry-based certification, enrolling in post-secondary education, or enlisting in the military. We are looking to expand on this success with increased focus on the overall CCMR goal and the progress measures that we've included here. On the next slide, page 138, you see the definition there. CCMR is measured by the percentage of graduates achieving one or more of the following indicators: either meeting the TSI criteria in both math and reading, or meeting the AP or IB test criteria, or completing dual credit courses, or receiving an associate's degree, or receiving an industry-based certification, or enrolling in the military. And then the district can receive partial credit for students enrolling in career and technical education courses. On the next page, page 139, the CCMR board goal that we are proposing reads like this: the percent of graduates that meet the criteria for CCMR will increase from 60% to 67% by August 2024. Our current baseline data for the year 2019 is 60%, which is actually our 2018 graduates, because this indicator is actually always reported a year behind. We will be receiving data for 2020, which is our 2019 graduates. So we do not believe they have been affected in any way by this pandemic. And we are proposing to see a 2% increase when that data comes out, which should be in June. In 2021, we were more conservative in our goal setting because we don't know how the pandemic will affect this rate, but we do know the opportunities to pick up CCMR credits are not as readily available. After that, we expect to see increases each year with the final outcome in 2024 at 67%. The student groups include 2 additional groups that TEA reports for this indicator, which is continuously enrolled and non-continuously enrolled, which means that the continuously enrolled students have been in the district for 3 or more years, and the non-continuously enrolled students have been here less than 3 years. The first progress monitoring measure to go along with the CCMR board goal is the percent of students that receive an approved industry-based certification will increase from 9% to 13%. So students that receive an industry-based certification can graduate high school and start a career making a living wage immediately after high school. So you can see we have increases that are similar to the CCMR board goal. So an increase of 1% for 2020, and then holding steady for the year 2021, and then increasing for each year after that. And then on the next slide is the progress monitoring measure number 2, which is the TSI assessment results. So I wanted to include some data here so you can take a look at what our data looks like. The TSI assessment that's evaluated under CCMR is for reading, which you can see the blue bar there, and math, which is the orange bar, and then both of them together is the gray bar. So Socorro ISD has 47% achieving success on the TSI assessment in reading, compared to, if you look at the last set of graphs on the right, the state, which is at 32%. Our math is at 32%, the orange bar, compared to the state, which is at 24%. So we're doing well on the TSI assessment. However, the piece that we want to focus on is that math, because this will qualify students to go into the college level courses in math specifically, either through dual credit or once they graduate from Socorro ISD, they can enroll in post-secondary education without having to take any type of remediation courses. So our progress monitoring measure number 2 is the percent of CCMR students that achieve the TSI criteria. On the math, TSI A will increase from 32% to 36%. So 32 is our 2019 baseline. We're holding steady at 33 for 2020 and 2021, and then increasing up until 2024 to reach the 36%. And I'll go ahead and toss it back over to Jessica.
So again, with these HB3 board goals, we have a timeline. We did present to Cabinet back in February 5th, 2020. And then we did present to our principals at the February 20th leadership meeting that we had. It was proposed that we would have done this workshop back in March to present to you for board approval. But again, with the pandemic, that didn't happen. So we are moving forward with asking our campuses to create goals based on their campus data, similar to early childhood and mathematics, for early childhood literacy and mathematics in their campus improvement plans for the following year. And Dr. Starkey has sent direction to our principals on how to accomplish that, so that our campuses put back that focus on early literacy and math, and of course CCMR as well. We do ask that we move forward tonight with your approval of these proposed board goals at the May 19th board meeting as a consent agenda item. once we move forward, so that, again, our campuses can properly complete their campus improvement plan, and then our district improvement plan as well. And then we do plan to come back to the board 3 times a year with updates on how we are making progress towards that goal. We do plan to come back in October 2020 to present at a public board meeting our beginning of year data that we received from the iStation Diagnostics literacy and math tool, and then come back to you with 2019-2020 end of year CCMR data. We'd come back again February 2021 to present the middle of year updates, and then back in June 2023. And we would continue this trend each and every year. You would be presented with this document here, the Board Outcome Goal Progress Monitoring Report, so that you can monitor whether or not we are on track to meet the board goals required by HB3, and then you can see the campus updates individually as well. So that concludes our presentation of the HB board goals, our proposed goals for this year. At this time, we would take any questions you may have.
Before we proceed with questions, I do want to share with the board that while these are very trying times and different times for all of us, I do want to say that we have really looked at this while we have been conservative in a sense with knowing that the kids have had remote learning for the last 4, 5, 6 weeks. We also have set Team SISD expectations, which are high expectations. So we think we hit a happy median in there. We've brought in all of the stakeholders when bringing in these goals. When developing these goals, we think they are good goals that we can go forward and really measure the progress that our kiddos are making, even in this new normal. So with that being said, we will entertain any questions at this time.
President Nájera, this is Paul Garcia. I do got a question.
Yes, sir, Mr. Garcia.
Who's going to be operating and overseeing this initiative?
It's Mr. Garcia. Good evening. It will be the Department of Academics, but also, of course, the assistant superintendents, the principals. We oversee it as an umbrella, but this is academic, so it will encompass all stakeholders, most definitely, including cabinet, Dr. Espinosa, cabinet, academics, and of course, our campus principals and our assistant superintendents working with our campus principals.
Okay, thank you. And then also, what kind of impact do you think this COVID-19 will have on those numbers? And are we prepared for responding to this pandemic? I mean, if we do go to technology learning in the fall.
Great question. I think that it's very hard to tell at this point, but I will tell you that Socorro ISD, we started right away with online learning. Our assistant superintendents did a great job reaching out to our principals. Our teachers have done a phenomenal job reaching out to kids. So we're really working hard in making sure that those gaps are non-existent. Realistically, are there going to be some gaps? Absolutely. But what we're doing now is we're working on our summer program where we are getting our most at-risk kids, where teachers are reaching out, where principals are reaching out, where assistant superintendents are reaching out, where my department is reaching out to all of our most vulnerable kids that we anticipate may have those gaps, and we want to help them accelerate during the summer. And then as my team goes together during the summer, as we're planning for the fall, we are working at making sure that we recognize that this last 9 weeks has been difficult, yet at the same time, we are going to spiral our instruction and make sure that we get our kiddos caught up, Team SISD style, high expectations, and make sure that we give them the quality education that they deserve, and treat them as if they were our very own kids, like Dr. Espinosa says.
Thank you, Ms. Borrego. I appreciate you so much. Thank you.
Thank you, sir. Much appreciated, and happy to answer as many questions, and feel free to call, reach out, because the team is really working hard, including all of cabinet, Dr. Espinosa, to make sure that we don't let any kiddo fall behind. And so we're super excited about that, because we know that we have what it takes to close those gaps.
President Nájera, this is Ms. Rodriguez.
Yes, Ms. Rodriguez.
Ms. Borrego or Ms. Macias, in looking at the progress monitoring, the early childhood literacy, and the information, especially on the early childhood information that has been presented, I know, we want to have a goal that we can absolutely meet. I just have a question, and maybe I missed it during Ms. Macias's presentation. As I'm looking at each of these goals and the targets between 2022 and 2023, on each of the goals that are being presented, there's no increase in that. I understand absolutely between 2019 and 2021 because of the situation that we're currently in, but then I'm seeing an increase between 2021 and 2022 and between 2023 and 2024, but I'm looking at the same between 2022 and 2023. Is there a specific reason for that?
Yes, ma'am. We were looking at our data trends. We went as far back as we could to see what our trends in assessment look like. And what SISD does is we trend 2 years at the same, and then we start increasing. So that is why we were very conservative and following that trend and looking back at how we've currently performed. Again, there are some unknowns that are still coming our way with the new TEKS that recently changed. This is the first year of implementation, and then they will be tested within the next couple of years. So looking at that, that's coming. That's why we were very conservative in kind of keeping them at the same level.
Okay, thank you. I was just, again, in looking at trends, I just want to make sure we understand as a board why we're not seeing an increase between those 2 years. That makes perfect sense based on the trends. However, realistically, I would love to see an increase between those 2 years. That's just kind of my thought behind it. But yeah, thank you. Thank you for that information.
You're welcome.
Thank you.
Are there any other questions?
Yes, President Nájera.
Yes, sir, Dr. Espinosa.
Yes, thank you, Ms. Rodriguez. And I'd like to go back to Trustee Garcia. Garcia's still on, right, Mr. Garcia?
Yes, sir. Go ahead.
Oh, okay, good. Yeah, no, I think that was a great question by Trustee Garcia. As far as how will this pandemic impact, and as you all know, it's kind of the unknown factor how this pandemic, and we got an idea, but as Ms. Borrego mentioned, and Ms. Macias and Ms. McMain, our expectations are real high. But a couple of things and we're already having several conversations, about how this can look, more than in my eyes of meeting those goals. Those goals, hey, we're going to meet them. I'm not, want to make sure we're going to have a plan in place to make sure we meet those goals. But how could this pandemic impact meeting those goals? And again, we're going to do everything in our power to make sure that we do meet them. But we're having conversations, for example, And as y'all know, I'm a big believer in smaller student teacher ratio. Okay. So with this pandemic, some of the recommendations that are being out there, and I agree wholeheartedly, well, to protect our students, to protect our employees, you know, you go to a middle school classroom, for example, a math class at 6th grade math, you may have 30 kids. You know, you go to an elementary class at 3rd grade, there's 22 students. Well, to reduce the potential of getting the COVID-19, they're recommending, you know, social distancing. So, you know, I've seen class sizes of 12 or fewer. Well, when you look at reducing those class sizes of 12 or fewer, well, if you're going to do that, you got several options. Number one, stagger the schedule. So it could impact that staggering the schedule. What I'm a huge believer in, hiring extra teachers, if it's possible, to reduce the student teacher ratio, which would cost money. And kind of looking at our situation, we just don't know that's possible. You know, you could start it with, you know, hey, maybe we'll start with the our more fragile kids first, and then our more at risk or our younger kids first. As I mentioned, staggering our schedule, different attendance policies, for example, because there may be some parents, even if the governor and everything and everyone is saying, hey, it's good to come back, I can assure you that there's going to be a lot of parents, team that aren't going to be comfortable bringing their children back to school at this point in time. So, you know, maybe having to look at different attendance policies. I do think that the remote learning will continue, whether we start the school year and then we have to go back, everybody go home. There's another spike with the COVID-19. Remote learning needs to continue. We may come back, then after 2 weeks later, then come back, then have to, you know, back and forth, you know. So also the social emotional needs of our students. You know, how can we provide the mental health support and the wraparound supports for students when they come back, you know, to help them recover and bring back that safety net of schools, because they've been gone a while. So to answer Trustees Garcia, yeah, it's going to have many impacts, you know, but again, like Ms. Borrego said, hey, we're going to, you know, work hard to make sure that our goals are met for the betterment of our students. I know I apologize. That was a long-winded answer there, long-winded kind, but I just kind of wanted to, when Trustee Garcia asked that question, those thoughts came to my mind. Thank you.
Thank you, super. Appreciate it.
Any other questions? Board members, as it has been stated, House Bill 3 does require us to approve these goals, and they will be on the consent agenda at our regular May 19th board meeting. While House Bill 3 does not require us to include in the superintendent's evaluation, it is recommended as part of best practices. And that will be something that the board will decide at a future meeting. It would normally be added under goal 2 of the superintendent's evaluation. But again, that's something the board will decide at a future meeting. And I really want to thank, I've had the opportunity to speak with Ms. Borrego and her team a couple of times in regard to these goals. And I want to thank them so much for all of their hard work. Whenever last conference I went to in February, I went to sessions about these House Bill 3 goals, and it was daunting. It was scary to know that there were 14 possible subsections that we would have to set goals for. But Ms. Borrego and her team, Ms. Macias, Ms. McBain, Dr. Starkey, have done an amazing, amazing job at making it understandable and achievable. I want to thank y'all very much.
Thank you, Ms. Nahida. We have an amazing team. The academics team works great together, and it was a pleasure working with you and with the team. So thank you so much. And with the guidance of Dr. Espinosa, it's been a real pleasure and a great learning experience as well.
And thank you. If there are no further questions, okay. If there are no further business, we will adjourn this board workshop, and the time is 7:24. Everyone, please be safe and take care.